Here in Mancora, I've had to show some real tenacity. Get it? Tenacity? Tenacity? Tentacity? Yeah. I just slay. I really just slay it. But to be real, yes. Shall I explain how I've had to show tentacity in this kind of paradise? My second pass through Peru has been better than my first in some ways. The south, east, and north are all parts of Peru outside of the western capital, Lima. And quite honestly, I'd argue that what I call the southern coast of Peru is in some ways better than the east, sans Machu Picchu, and the Amazon jungle. The south has included such natural gems as Huacachina Desert Oasis, Paracas Mini Galapagos, Nazca, lines. Sometimes I get distracted by little tiny grains of sand that blow up in and around me. I have recreated an African scene. This really reminds me of Africa, the camping. This especially reminds me of Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, because the layout is quite similar, and I shall show that at the moment. The Dar es Salaam had more amenities, with a pool and a cafe and a library, but I almost like the down and gritty style of this surf camp because just get you back to the elements. First of all, I'm grounding. Grounding is where your feet and your body connect directly to the earth. That's what I'm doing right now, connecting directly to the earth. But if we come to my humble abode, which is the tent on the right, we'll encounter a relatively clean version of me. Something that's a surprise to most people. Yeah, the travel version of me actually is mostly cleaner than the travel version of others. No, I'm joking. What I meant to say is the travel version of me is mostly cleaner than the travel version of others, which is exactly what I just said. Okay, am I going to get my shit together? The travel version of me is cleaner than the home version of me because I know cleanliness helps keep you healthy on the road. In some of these developing countries, cleanliness does matter. Okay, well, I mean, it's good enough. I never made my bed yet, but I have relatively orderly piles of piles. Shall I clean before I announced how clean I am? Okay. In any case, I've been going through it here in Mancora because of the weather. Why I've had to show tentacity is because the weather in the ocean, Pacific side, has completely sent gigantic, ruining waves over my plans. Anyone who has been on a scuba boat or surfed before knows that obviously we do that in water. If you're doing it in a natural setting, it's in the ocean. And Mancora actually has a reputation for being one of the best places in the world to learn surfing because of its consistent, calm waves. But of course, that had to change the moment I landed. And will last until when I leave. So the tentacity has been me accepting reality, accepting life for what it is, and having my plans change. What have my plans changed been? Well, I think I've taken some much needed rest. I have been on a grueling tear since resting in the Amazon for 2 weeks. Now I've basically been going hard at it at a grueling pace for more than a month, and I guess the weather told me that I had to take a fucking chill pill. So, something that I've been practicing, even though that ain't my job, is making my bed. Now, when I stay anywhere long term, I refuse daily cleaning service because that's just a waste of resources, tight resources that could be better used doing other things. So here we are inside my tent, and I almost feel the urge to ask the owner to let me break the tent and make it again, because that would really be the true African experience. In fact, I so love this lifestyle, being in a tent again, that I have looked into doing a 6 months long overlanding on the other side of Africa. To be clear, the tour safari includes many of the countries I've already been to in Africa in East, which would be fine. That would be a great reminder of what that epic 2018 bush camping trip was like, because it'll basically be bush camping through a lot more of Africa, including some of the questionable safety countries in West Africa and Central Africa. So it's been a lot going on. Am I complaining? Of course. I have a right to complain even in paradise. This has been a trip of transformation, as all of them. I affectionately call them soldiers, because they are really a journey of the soul. Well, whatever the soul means. I'm still a scientist, I have no idea. Or maybe, soul has too many religious connotations. Spirit, whatever you want to call it. Have I actually done a vlog since my San Pedro ceremony? I forget now. I might have, but in any case, Science is one type of knowledge. Science is what is the basis of a lot of my decision making because I studied as an electrical engineer. I believe science has given us a lot of the beneficial, transformative, technological advances that we all take for granted and rely on now. But there is other knowledge, okay? And again, I distinctly and purposefully use the word other knowledge. I never use the word better or worse, just other. Other because it is literally other knowledge, and I have no concept about whether to assess as better or worse. All you can do is try and have different outcomes. So, while I close up my tent, this move being important to keep out some of the dangerous mosquitoes that carry dengue and chikungunya, I'll explain that San Pedro, which is the ceremony I did, is lesser known than ayahuasca, which is what South America is known for, but no less effective or ancient. In fact, San Pedro, the oldest recorded psychedelic plant medicine. And now this is totally Tanzania. I did vlogs from a hammock, and I'm doing them again from a hammock. This weather has taught me that you can invest a lot of effort to achieve a goal, and the end goal maybe has always been the destination, but structure it so that you enjoy the journey, because sometimes end goals are dependent on things. Life is actually dependent on macro circumstances outside of all of our control. The key is knowing how to have this graceful dance between the two, what's in and what's out. Why I love the ocean so much is that it's a metaphor for life. Sometimes you're right at that boundary of what's in and out of control. For example, I have invested quite a lot of time to increase my ocean skills through scuba diving, through free diving, through even breath holding. And what I have found is that for as much as I can control this meat machine, some things are more powerful than the meat machine. Actually, many things, the ocean being one of them. The ocean is too strong for me to surf. The ocean's too strong for me to scuba dive. But I decided to have a different communion with the ocean today, and I basically just threw on the snorkel gear and let the waves toss me around how they would. The reason why I throw on the snorkel gear is because the mask and especially the snorkel allow me to just trust in the fact that I can breathe if my face hits the water. That's one of the things that can happen with people, is they panic when water, especially salty ocean water, enters their mucous membranes, eyes, nose, mouth. I admit that that's a feeling that can jar you and choke you, but it can also remind you that with skills you can get through that. So those metaphors, those jarring, choking aspects of life, you can get through, and breath is actually one of the main ways to do so. I've sometimes harshly judge myself for how I spend my time on these months long sojourns. I have to remind myself that I took back power to be my own boss, and there's no way that I should regress to being the worst boss that I've ever had, even when I was working in a family business or in corporate. I should be the best boss I'm ever going to have. And I remind myself of that constantly, because going back to the engineering, I do have an inner engineer that I think is still a practical, logical, helpful guide, but turns everything into an optimization exercise. In my brain, I can sometimes forget to enjoy because the engineer is busy calculating how I could have done things better, how I can currently do things better, and how I can do things better in what's to come. Sometimes why I like having the ocean beat me about with its waves is that you just want to be in the visceral moment. Sometimes you just want to drop down into those senses, into the sensory experience. In some ways, it's becoming primitive. It's grounding. It's something different. Because that's also a part of the experience. I mean, I love my engineer self. Trust me, it's kept me alive, it's kept me sane, it's kept me surviving, it's kept me thriving. But sometimes I just want to feel the moment, be in the moment, experience the moment. Another way that I can do that is I can just offload all these fucking thoughts onto Facebook and YouTube, or mostly YouTube. Restream's been a fuckface still, but I've found that actually it's maybe less Restream's fault and more the weak infrastructure where I'm at. I mean, I call it weak, but I'm streaming in 1080p now. Just a comment on that alone, how far things have come. The internet around the world has gotten so good in the past 5-10 years that we're going from barely 480p in 2018 to 1080p in 2023. I mean, what more do we expect? I mean, we're in developing countries. Some of these places, most of these places, have no clean drinking water out of their taps, but they have internet where I can stream in 1080p. Fuck me. That's why sometimes I love watching. I'm my own best audience because I can talk myself out of a lot of negativity in a vlog. I can remind myself part of why I'm living the life I'm living. If I'm going to take back control, I've got to be good, great, exceptional to me. During the San Pedro ceremony, I had a facilitator who's asked me many hard-hitting, insightful questions. One of them being, when you talk to yourself, do you say nice things to yourself? So, I think about that a lot. And I've been thinking about a lot. But I've also been feeling a lot. Maybe this is the end of the vlog? Maybe I'm just going to continue. Maybe there's a lot to say. There's been heavy spaces between my vlogs as of late because there's just been too much breakneck pace. I even missed out on one of the highlights of the South, the Colca Canyon. This is an example of opposites. With the penguins, Humboldt, at Paracas and the condors Andean at Coca Canyon, I actually lucked into them. May you be surprised. An animal lover like me, never knowing about these types of excursions existing, well, that happens. But I was able to correct course because I like to talk to people, and people can give ideas as to what is worthwhile, what is worth your time, especially things I would call off the beaten path. Now, Coca Canyon is on the path, but I would argue that a lot of the south trek that I did is off. Actually, scratch that. Machu Picchu is what Peru's known for, and I'd argue that maybe a lot of other things are off the beaten path. Scratch that. I'm going to go back to my original. Who gives a fuck what the beaten path is or is not? Okay? Sometimes you just got to go with your interest. My interest is animals, and I followed the animals outside the path of the Amazon. So obviously in South America, Amazon is King Kong. They even have a dessert called King Kong here, as a side note. I followed the animals to the Amazon, and I think partly that might have clouded my ability to ascertain other circumstances, especially coming off a wildly successful Galapagos encounter with the hammerheads. Those hammery heads are still a highlight for me, and I think those combined circumstances really clouded my understanding of what more could be. But forced into Peru the second time around, I think I've taken a different approach, a much more spontaneous approach. Actually, the spontaneous approach has started ever since I started proper solo backpacking. Previously, I had to have a plan because other people have schedules, but now that I'm on my own schedule, it has essentially been arrive that day, decide that day what to do. Perhaps it's lucky for me and less lucky for the countries, but the demand has been low since post-pandemic. A lot of places are struggling to recover, so that means that I can literally step into any hostel, onto any bus, and have it run without really being worried about capacity. There have maybe been one or two situations, namely in Sao Paulo, that have caused problems, but Sao Paulo is the most populous city, 22 to 30 million depending on estimates in South America, so that's to be expected. But everything else has been largely good to go, and I've liked and enjoyed the spontaneity. But also, I'm questioning whether this level of spontaneity can also be its own draining exhaustion. On rest days, which have been the last two, excluding today, I've been just catching up on my neuroscience podcasts, and one such podcast summarized that the brain is here to minimize uncertainty, and I can think of no more opposite circumstance than the type of life I've been living. So, perhaps, while this type of lifestyle has been something that I've actively chosen, one thing to be gentle with myself is that I think there are some fundamental commonalities that human brains share across all human brains. I have no clue what those fundamentals are per se, because I have challenged so many of them. I fall outside the norm of many of society's constructs, but suffice, I think, that perhaps it depends on how this uncertainty arises. For example, I might have to do some research. Does chosen uncertainty change the dynamic? Or does your body still react? Because, for example, for the last at least probably 2 months now, every single day there can be a little bit of a question as to how I sleep, how I eat, and how I stay alive. Because I'm moving from place to place so consistently, consistent, that I have to question these things regularly. Other people I've encountered have been slow traveling, and that's been something that I think that I've also liked, because I've tested it in multiple occasions on this trip. For example, the Amazon. In the Peruvian Amazon, I've already hunkered down for 2 weeks and enjoyed the local animals that were on a farm stay. Those were already grand and majestic in their own rights. Scarlet macaws, tarantulas. So I've had an example of just staying the course, and I think that my answer is probably somewhere in the middle. That's why I've been wavering between the two here and there for a while now. I'm in some ways happy that the waves of the Pacific Ocean have forced me to stop doing, going, and just drop into myself, relax, feel some feelings that maybe I had been running from. Running can work. It's a perfectly legitimate defense mechanism. But at a certain point, being the experimental person I am, I have to be open to many different ways, many different situations. And recently, feeling has come to the forefront. I'll do a deep dive into my San Pedro ceremony because I've been going in and out. I've mentioned it, name dropped it, and then moved on to something else. But I recorded my trip. 5 hours worth. 3 of them in video form, 2 of them in audio form when night fell. Just been trying to contextualize everything ever since. And that's actually forced my rest period. Because, truth be told, I've never been one for substances, really. Because they've never really worked well on me. And they're expensive. But now, circumstances have changed a lot, and I've always been open if the moment opened itself. And of all the times that the moments have opened, I believe the San Pedro is the one that has been most transformational, most effective, but I'm still trying to understand the concrete moves after the emotional moves. Here I am.